Yeah, so we should have about 4 more people on their way, but we can go ahead and
Okay.
get started.
We can wait another minute if you want.
Podcast listeners here, which is amazing. And then there's some DPA fosters here. Dallas Pets Live is based out of Dallas, Texas. And we used to kind of do cats on the side. It wasn't really a big thing of ours. We had Tina heading up the TNR program, and that was where we really focused our efforts. But surprisingly, in the last year, we actually surpassed amount of cat fosters to dog fosters. So we are now more cat heavy than we are dog heavy, which is crazy to us. And so it was about time that we actually put on some type of training support for our kitty cat friends, because I know that it's not always the easiest thing, especially when we're getting little ringworm kittens and all that stuff. That means socialization and adult cats, getting turned in. Adult cats are actually one of our, it's pretty equal to the amount of kittens we get, which is surprising to me. I would have thought we were like really all kittens, but we actually do have a lot of adult cats. And I know that they can come with their own set of challenges too. So we are so excited to have Molly teaching this class for us, and we will be having it every few months. So the topics will kind of all blend into each other. And I will let Molly go ahead and show her presentation, and then afterwards we will have time for some Q&A.
Great, thank you. And thank you guys for being here. And we can be sure to send me your topic ideas, because we just picked this one because it's kitten season and thought this would be a good time to talk about what's involved when you have a kitten that is going to go on to be an adult cat and live with someone else, and what does that look like, and how do we make sure that cat has the best life ever and never comes back into the shelter or has to face rehoming at any point in its life. So be sure to send us more topics too, so that we can do those. Now, I am going to tell you that my internet is not great out here. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico today, and the internet is not good, and it's really windy and it's cold. It's like 35 degrees outside. And for some reason that makes my internet even more unstable, which makes zero sense because all the cables are underground. So I don't get that, but that's what happens. So if I happen to drop out or freeze, don't worry, stay put, and it'll relaunch me back in a minute. So hopefully we don't have that today, but I'll prepare you for that if that happens. Okay, I'm gonna start here. Let's just start with shaping kittens into great cats. And we've got our cute little kitten here growing into teenagehood, really. And so I want to start by thanking everybody for fostering, because, without you guys fostering these cats, it saves lives. I mean, bottom line is it saves lives. It gives that cat an opportunity to go on and be a great cat and have a wonderful home. So without you fostering, none of this would happen. So thank you for sharing your homes and your hearts and your expertise with these great kittens. Now I want to start, let me just start and tell you, first of all, for those of you who I don't know, why did they ask me to do this presentation? I am a certified feline training and behavior specialist. I'm also a certified cat behavior consultant. I'm a fear-free certified trainer, and I'm a certified Reiki master, which doesn't always have anything to do with cats, but I use my Reiki on animals, cats always, and I've actually done quite a bit of Reiki on horses, and I'm now working with the Equestrian Riding Center that does the riding for special needs children and adults. I do Reiki on their horses, which helps them to offload a lot of that emotion that they carry from the people that they're serving. And I'm the executive director of Cat Behavior Solutions. So I started Cat Behavior Solutions because shelter euthanasia is the #1 cause of death in cats. And also, another fact that we know is that the majority of adult cats that are surrendered to shelters are done so because of behavior issues, either refusing to use the litter box or destruction or aggression to other cats or to the owners. And so I thought, how can I help in my little slice of the world divert that shelter intake of cats? So I offer cat behavior consultants to people, all kinds of enrichment programs to help people take better care of their cats. And one of the ways I do that is I've built a library of podcasts on Cat Talk Radio. So we do a weekly podcast where we talk about a different topic or we interview people. My husband is a good enough sport to co-host that with me. So we do that weekly. If you haven't checked that out, do so. And by all means, share these resources with your adopters and fellow cat people and fosters. And then I'm also a trainer mentor for Jackson Galaxy's Greater Good, has a program called Cat Positive Pro. And that's where we teach shelters how to socialize and better integrate their cats that are shut down and or aggressive, acting out aggressively. So we primarily teach them clicker training through that program. This semester, I have a shelter in Grand Junction, Colorado that I'm working with. So what makes me uniquely qualified to teach this class, other than the fact that I have fostered hundreds and hundreds of kittens and kittens? This is, I lost my beloved Tabasco a little over a year ago. And this is my newest son, Pico de Gato. And that was taken in June of last year. And here he is now at 13 pounds at a little over a year old. And he's an awesome cat. So I do tend to raise very good cats from kittens. When I foster kittens, I usually have a waiting line of people wanting to adopt them because they come very well behaved. And of course they come clicker trained and all of that. So let's talk about those responsibilities as fosters. What are we responsible for? Well, bottom line is we should be responsible for that cat never having to be rehomed for any cause of its own, and certainly not any behavioral or personality issues. So what does that mean? That means specifically providing a fear-free environment that facilitates that evolution to becoming a great cat. That's a lot bundled up in there, and we'll unbundle that later. Of course, it also means providing good nutrition to that kitten, because that has a lot to do with how they feel and how they grow up. Teaching them manners, of course, and keeping them healthy and socialized. And of course, safe, the common sense things like removing the small ingestible objects like your hair bands and keeping your toilet bowls closed and screen safe and all of that, that it becomes second nature to all of you seasoned fosters. So let's talk about windows of socialization, because when you start, meaning how old that kitten is when it comes into your life, really matters. And that affects the level of your challenge. All right. So 2 to 7 weeks is considered a critical socialization period. In that, there's a sweet spot of 4 to 5 weeks. That's when the kittens are weaning, and that actually makes them much more open to change. So we're talking about a tiny window of time out of this cat's entire life. And note that the kitten window of socialization is much shorter than a puppy's window of socialization. So we got a little bit of time. 8 weeks, that window for socialization starts to close. And at 12 weeks, it might be entirely shut. The kittens are fully weaned and they are not predisposed to accept change. Now, that doesn't mean that it's impossible to socialize an older kitten, because we know we've all done it at one time or another. We've gotten an 8, 10, or 3-month-old kitten to foster that's feral, and we socialize it. But something that you need to know, starting later isn't socializing. Okay, so if we are really starting with that 3-month-old kitten, it's not technically socializing, because we're changing the way that the brain thinks. It takes longer and it limits how much progress that cat can make. And here in Santa Fe, the Santa Fe Humane Society, they like to socialize feral kittens because we live in an environment where there are a lot of natural predators. So, you know, TNR isn't always the most ideal thing. We make a run at it really hard to try to socialize a kitten, almost no matter what its age, before we give up and say, this cat's just not going to be socialized and TNR it, or find a working cat opportunity for it. So feral kittens, whoops, what happened? Aren't technically socialized. We aren't socializing them at that point. We are really habituating them to contact. And there is a neurological difference there. So the other thing that's important to know is that 30% of the cat's genetics play a role in its personality. All right, so what does that mean? That means that, you know, most of us are fostering and dealing with stray kittens. All right, it happens that people come into the shelter with litters of kittens that their female cat has birthed, but it's important to know. So if you can get that information, the reason it's important to know, I call this genetic remembering. So I noticed when I took in a kitten of a feral cat. I lived in a condo in Oak Lawn, and there was this big feral cat colony across the street, and they were constantly having kittens. And one day the mother had moved the kittens to my side of the street while the landscapers were there trimming the bushes, and left one. And it was probably 3 weeks old, really pretty tiny. Took me hours to capture this little kitten out of the bushes in the pouring down rain. It bit me. And I learned from then keeping this cat. I foster failed this cat mostly because I couldn't find anybody to adopt him. Kittens born to feral mothers are genetically predisposed to be more wary of humans. Part of that's because the physical evolution of cats, they are descendants from African wildcats. They still share about a 96% DNA link to their wildcat ancestors. They have evolved physically very little, but one of the more important ways that they have evolved physically is that their frontal lobe in their brain has shrunk about 30% from their wildcat ancestors, not making them less intelligent, but making them less afraid, because that's where fear is controlled in the brain. So what they're finding is that these long lines of feral cats that have never had any socialization to people have a larger frontal lobe in the brain, which means they have more fear. Kittens born to abandoned cats, cats that have been owned 1 or 2 generations back, are going to be much easier to socialize. So the more information we can get about the kitten that we're dealing with, the better prepared we're going to be in knowing what to do. So appropriately socialized kittens grow to be great cats, right? Cats who learn faster, cats who have better problem solving abilities. And I'm not making this stuff up or just anecdotal. This is actually scientific research that's proven this. They have a lower emotionality, which really makes a big difference when they get older. They're more confident, they're more brave, they're more well-adjusted cats. They're the cats that come running up to company and go, hey, you know, thanks for coming over, rather than diving under the bed and hiding for a week. So what do we do? All right, how do we get there? How do we get this kitten to be a wonderful adult cat? There are several things. We're going to start by talking about gentle, positive handling. What does that mean specifically? Ideally, 40 minutes, minimum of 40 minutes a day by 5 or more different people. All right, when the kittens are between that 13 and 14 weeks of age. Short, frequent handling sessions are better than one long session. So instead of working all day, eating dinner, and then handling the kitten from 7:30 to 8:15, handling the kitten multiple times a day during the day for, 10 minutes at a time, even 5 minutes at a time, is better than one long session. So scientific studies have shown that these kittens handled 40 minutes a day versus 15 are much more warm to being handled and approaching humans later in life. And here's a very interesting one. Kittens handled just 10 minutes twice a day actually physically matured earlier, opened their eyes one day earlier, and left the nest 3 days earlier. So it makes a difference in how these cats physically are evolving. So another form of handling, it's not just picking them up and having everybody love on them, which is important. I had a live workspace in Dallas, and back before COVID, we had lots of people in and out all day long. And every time we have fosters and we answer the door, it was locked door, ring the doorbell, get greeted. So anytime we'd answer the door, it'd answer with the kitten foster, say, here, hold the kitten. And, the kitten had lots and lots of exposure all day long, being handled by all kinds of different people and all those things. So this is a lot more difficult in COVID. I get that. That's a real challenge. How do you expose yourself and the kitten to more than 5 different people a day unless you have a spouse and multiple kids at home? It's much, much more challenging. And it is something, it's one of the things that Ania had asked that we talk about in our upcoming podcast on COVID and cats, is how is that affecting this generation of kittens that are in foster right now, that were fostered during a COVID year, because they are going to have less exposure. And we're going to talk about that in a couple weeks on Cat Talk Radio. So one of the other things that is very important that you do is handle this kitten in what we call medical handling, because it's going to have to go to the vet for its whole life. So how do we, in this window of socialization, prepare this kitten for vet visits, in addition to just picking it up and loving on it and teaching it that people are safe and calm and wonderful? So we want to start with carrier and car ride desensitization. Now we can do that easily in COVID. So that basically involves leaving the carrier out so that the kitten is always familiar, or cat, this applies to kittens or cats, leave that carrier out. If you have to, if the kitten or cat is particularly predisposed to fear for the carrier, then feed it in the carrier. Take it on car rides. to the store, run out, we pick up our groceries, which is wonderful byproduct of COVID, by the way. I love ordering my groceries online and going and picking them up. That will not stop no matter what happens to our pandemic. And I take Pico with me. Anytime we go to the pet food store, I take Pico because they're curb delivering now. So we take Pico, he gets to go, he gets to ride in the car, and that's very, very good for your kitten to experience that. Restraint. So you know that the vet is going to hold that kitten and or the vet tech, restrain them for an examination. So restrain the kitten in ways like this photo is showing you, where they're going to be examined so that those sensations don't bother it later in life. Sonia Yin, Dr. Yin specifically suggests get an empty syringe, like the kind that we gruel feed with, and pinch the skin and let them get used to the sight of a syringe and a smell. Pinch the skin and pretend like you're giving shots, a little pressure, so that they get used to all of these things that they are going to see and smell in a doctor's office. It could be taking a temperature, being weighed. You're probably weighing your kittens now anyway, because, that's what we got to do to make sure that they are growing and eating properly. X-rays. So when a cat has to get x-rays, if you don't want to sedate it, you've got to hold it flat still. Teach your kitten that holding it flat, lay it down on its side, hold it flat, make it be still for 15, 20 seconds. And blood draw. There are particular blood draw holds that vet techs do. We can maybe talk about that in a cat handling session. We have several volunteers that come through DAS that plan to volunteer in the clinic. And I teach my particular form of blood draw hold with a cat. It's not a comfortable position for a cat. And so it's not something you want your cat to experience for the first time when it's 2 years old. You want to be able to practice that when it's a kitten. So the next big thing that we have to do for these kittens is exposure. All right. Expose the kitten to everything that they might encounter as an adult cat. And who knows what that is, because they're going to go on and live in someone's household. So some of the things that is, and this is important because we keep talking about this window of socialization. What that kitten sees during that period, it won't be afraid of as an adult. And the same is true opposite. What it doesn't see and experience in that critical socialization window, it's going to be scared of when it's an adult. So, and they say that the lack of exposure to new things is just as detrimental as having a traumatic experience. Layers of traumatic experiences for cats build up a great degree of stress. They're very good at hiding that stress, and then that starts showing in things like aggression. People tell me all the time, my cat's just suddenly being aggressive out of the blue. So some of these things that you should consider, the car rides we already talked about, maybe stroller rides, harness and leash walks. Go ahead and harness train that kitten early, desensitizing to the carriers. Here's something we don't normally think of, but a variety of voices and what voices are doing. Laughing, coughing, crying, talking loud, but be careful with that because their ears are very, very sensitive at that age. But the home they go into may be entirely different than our homes. TV, maybe we don't watch a lot of TV, but where that cat's going to go, TV might be played all the time, and that's something it needs to be desensitized to. Variety of music. The doorbell is a big one. Doorbell sounds. And here's another one that you don't think of until you see a cat, an adult cat, react to these things. I've seen adult cats react to guys with big bushy beards, just like, oh my God, what is that, right? And hats, the first time a cat sees a person with a hat on, if it's never seen it before, glasses, all the kinds of things that we wear. So use this as an opportunity to play dress up with your cat and put on a bunch of variety of different things so it sees it. And that includes other species as well. Dogs, of course, is the most obvious. Birds, if you have them. I always try to have babies and toddlers come over, you know, my friends that have young children, come visit my fosters, because I want those kittens to be familiar with little people, because that is something it's probably going to encounter at some point in its life. And then, of course, other cats. If a kitten is not exposed to other kittens, if you're raising a solo kitten or you have a litter of kittens that's not exposed to other kittens, it is likely not going to be a cat-friendly cat. And that's very important, because there are an average of like 2.4 cats per household. So the chances of your kitten living with another cat is pretty good. So no fear basically means less behavior issues. And then I can retire, right? So that's the goal here, is we want me to have nothing to do, because all the cats in the world are going to be very well socialized and don't have behavior issues. You want to think about this in terms of hitting all of the cat's senses, what it sees, what it hears, what it touches, you know, textures, carpet, concrete, grass, dirt, all of those sorts of things. But be very cautious with scents, because a cat's sense of smell is very, very delicate, especially when they're kittens. And I'm going to say one scent that you do want to make sure that your kitten is exposed to is baby powder. So because this kitten is probably going to be in a household that has children at one point or another, help it to get ready for a baby in the house by smelling those things. That way, when it smells it again, when it's 4 years old, it's going to go, oh, I remember that. They remember absolutely everything that you're doing in this window of time. So baby powder, baby lotions, all those very unique smells that are to having a child in the home, expose that kitten to. But be gentle, okay? There's a fine line between exposing your kitten to a bunch of different things and flooding your kitten. Because if you flood your kitten with way too much going on at too much, it's gonna get afraid of you and people. So, you know, go one at a time and don't overdo it, but do have variety. So feeding is a really great opportunity to socialize a kitten, especially if you're fostering a feral kitten. All right, mealtime is your ideal time. So pet and touch the kitten while it's hungry, which means you should be not free feeding dry food, feed meals. Sit with the kitten. So watch the kitten and sit with it while it's eating until it's finished eating. Once it's finished eating, you pick up and leave and you take the food with you. We're counter conditioning here. So we are associating people and people being around with something really wonderful, mealtime. Feed off your finger or a spoon. Be careful feeding off your finger. Some of them get a little voracious and will bite your finger, but that's an opportunity to get them used to hands if you have feral kittens that are pulling away when you reach towards them. So stop free feeding dry food, feed canned food, but you can, and of course, avoid byproducts and grains. You want to feed frequently. like 6 times a day, a kitten should probably, I feed 6 times a day when I'm fostering kittens, and then I wean them back to 4 times a day as an adult. Cats in the wild will eat 10 to 20 small meals a day. Their stomachs are very tiny in relationship to the rest of the organs in their body compared to other species. So naturally they snack in little small meals. Very unnatural for a cat to have 2 meals. Works great for a dog. You can feed a dog in the morning and at night, but for a cat that doesn't work. It needs to have little tiny meals throughout the day, especially kittens while they're developing. So canned food. You can put dry food out. You don't have to stop feeding dry food completely, just stop free feeding dry food. Mostly because you lose an opportunity for great socialization. But put that dry food in a food puzzle. That helps that kitten learn to forage. That's developing at this time where its mother is naturally teaching it to hunt if it's out in the wild, but because it's trapped in our home, they don't have that opportunity. So put the food in a food puzzle. You can buy them. I sell the round ones that are like they have to nose or paw to make the food fall out. I also sell the fishbowl ones where they have to learn to scoop out, and little kittens learn it right away. You can also do the toilet paper roll ones. You can get a muffin pan and put little cards on top of you can use playing cards, put them on top of the muffin holes and hide dry food in certain compartments. That mentally stimulates that cat so that it's learning to problem solve and also helps with pent-up energy. Another thing we got to teach cats is manners. So nuisance behaviors are a major contributing factor to cat surrender. And what kitten do you have that has never climbed your leg, right? In fact, Pico's starting that for some reason right now. It means staying off counters and food prep areas. And this is a real challenge when you have a separate set of rules for your cats at home versus your fosters. So for instance, in my house, it's okay that Pico gets up on the counters. I choose my battles, and that's just not one that I really care about. I have one counter I taught him not to get up on. All the other food prep surfaces are open game. Well, a cat doesn't understand. You're the foster, you can't get up here, but my cats can. So it's challenging. That part is challenging. Biting, scratching, pouncing on people. We don't want that. We certainly don't want clawing furniture, and we want them to use the litter box. But these are normal kitten behaviors, right? So all these things we're talking about, pouncing, biting, climbing, scratching, you know, they are experiencing this instinctive behavior at this age to just explode and hunt all the times. And that's good. We need to cultivate those instincts. The food puzzles is one way to cultivate those instincts. Pouncing is a natural behavior, but somehow we have to teach them how to pounce the appropriate things and not our bare feet. Biting is also a very natural behavior for a cat, but not us. Climbing is great. They love to climb. It's natural, but we have to teach them not to do the legs and to do the scratching posts and the other things. So they need to practice these behaviors in an appropriate outlet. And here's something very interesting to consider. Their sensitivity to movement is really keen at this stage when they're kittens. It's how they see and how they hunt. So cats don't see a full spectrum of color like we do. They don't really see reds and yellows. They see more of a monochromatic tone. And that's because they're able to see the least little thing move out there. So if you don't ever play with them, if you don't ever show them toys moving, then the only potential prey they ever see moving is the people. So think about that. We've got to provide movement. So how do we redirect that pounce and kill? You don't want to use your hands. None of the come chase the fingers under the blankets. None of guys particularly like to do the claw when they're kittens, and you're like claw. It's fun, but it's not a good idea. You want to make sure that you are always putting something between this and the cat's natural hunting behaviors. So toys, wands, crinkle balls, anything like that. Don't expect the kitten to play on its own. Don't just put a pile of toys out there and say, okay, you have enough to play with. We have to actively play with that kitten multiple times a day. All right. You don't want to tease the kitten with keep away when you play it. You've got to allow it to catch it, kick it, and really, most importantly, get that kill bite in. When a cat or a kitten delivers that kill bite, it has a boost of serotonin that goes off in the brain, which helps to control mood and sleep. It's very difficult for cats to get the proper amount of serotonin from their food. So prey playing goes a long way in making them feel emotionally equal and balanced. So you don't want to prey play without them getting the fruits of their kill, which in this case would be, to eat the mouse or eat the bird. It's the problem with laser play, because they get all worked up chasing the laser. And yeah, it's probably a little bit of good exercise and does simulate some of that hunting sequence, but they don't get to deliver the kill bite. So they don't get that release of energy. So what we want to do is reward them once they bite that toy. So toss them a little treat or give them a little bit of canned food at the end of prey play. And of course, I don't need to tell you guys this, but punishment. Don't punish them when they get too rough. Redirect those behaviors to an appropriate target. So how do we do that? How do we redirect those? It's called interrupt the inappropriate behavior, redirect them to an appropriate behavior, and then reward them for doing the good thing. So for instance, if a kitten is climbing your legs, pick it up and put it down, pull it off your legs, put it down on the ground, go get the wand toy, redirect it to the wand toy, and then reward it after it's had that kill bite. So how does this not reward it for bad behavior, right? Because there's a fine line here. Oh, I climb legs, I get prey play time. We don't want to make that association. Well, that little bit of time between the interruption and the redirection helps them from associating that with that initial behavior. So you want a little bit of time. So for instance, if they're playing rough with you, if they're biting you, this goes for adult cats too, by the way. If they're biting, jumping on your legs, you remove the body parts, yours, of course, not theirs. We don't ever want to remove kittens' body parts. So remove your body parts from accessibility. Put your hand behind your leg, walk around a corner, redirect with a distance toy, a wand toy, something that's putting distance between the things that the cat is biting and the toy, or leave the room. So pull your bodies out of the way and go walk off, or walk away so that you're away. But don't ever yell at them. They have such sensitive ears developing in this time period that it can be very frightening to them. And then all of a sudden you're associating people with fear. You've become inconsistent at that time. So another thing that we want to do during this kitten time, in addition to handling with compassion, handling to teach medical, exposing to a bunch of different things, bonding during mealtime, teaching them manners, correcting them in a positive way when they are doing something wrong. Now we want to also just do counter conditioning, which is simply pairing us people with something really wonderful. Treats, meals, playtime, anything like that. This is really great for nail trimming, which is another one of those things that we need to condition kittens to. So I like to use the Zen clippers. They come in a variety of sizes. And the reason is because it doesn't open up like a nail clipper. It has, I don't know if you can see this, but you see it has a little bitty hole in there. And that hole is different sizes depending on the size of the clipper. So I can't over trim. So the extra small that I carry is kitten size. So get the kitten, get the nail clipper, let the kitten smell the nail clipper, give the kitten a treat. Push the paws, give the kitten a treat. Clip one nail, give the kitten a treat. Every single step of nail trimming time should be rewarded with a treat so that the kitten looks forward to it. So all throughout its life, when it comes time to trim nails, it becomes very easy for the owners. Lick and lap is something that I use that I think is very easy because it's easy to dispense. It's a push-up treat. This particular brand is very low in calories. Be careful of learned behaviors. And I want you to keep this in mind as you are raising this kitten, because we see this a lot in the shelters, and we have to be very careful we're not allowing learned behaviors to develop. So for instance, if a frightened cat in a kennel hisses and people go away, then it goes, I've learned that the hissing behavior makes people go away. So everybody that comes up to the kennel, I'm going to hiss at them so that they go away. If I swat at you or I bite you and you stop petting me, then I'm going to learn that swatting equals stops petting. So be careful not to allow that kitten to get what it wants from bad behaviors. Counter surfing means I get picked up. That's a common one. When I have behavior cases with adult cats and people say, I'm trying to get my cat to stop counter surfing, one of the things I ask is, okay, so when he does, what do you do? Well, I pick him up and I put him down, and chances are he may be attention seeking, and that's what you absolutely don't want to do. So be careful what we are doing. So modifying unwanted behaviors. You can't tell a kitten no, or a cat. You have to show it what you want it to do instead. So think about that. No does not work for a cat, ever, never. Operant conditioning works really well. Positive punishment doesn't work on cats. So positive punishment is anything that comes from you, squirting with the bottle, yelling, spanking, whatever, like dogs, tugging. There are other species that respond better to positive punishment. It doesn't work on cats because cats have not evolved with a social hierarchy. So dogs and other species evolved with a social hierarchy where they care a great deal what you, as members of their pack, think and feel about them and their status. None of that goes through a cat's brain at all. So punishment only makes them afraid of you, and that's it. So don't do it. You only want to positively reinforce what you want them to do. So that's why in your mind, when you have a bad behavior, you have to say, what do I want that cat to do instead? It's already in it, and it's not a matter of stop biting me, because that's a normal behavior. I'm bored, I've got a lot of pent up energy, I've got to bite something, and you're the only thing moving in the room. So I can't tell you, no, don't have that natural behavior. I have to show you what I want you to do instead. So if you think about their problem behaviors in that way, it'll help you to solve some of those problems. Kitten enrichment. Obviously, we've got to provide them a great environment. Routine is huge in that, because their natural rhythm is hunt, catch, kill, eat, groom, sleep, which is why we play before meals. That gets their hunt, catch, kill, eat. They're naturally going to groom after a meal, and then they're going to take a little nap. And then they want to get up and do it all over again, over and over and over and over throughout the day. So try to time your activities, understanding what a cat's natural rhythm is. Routine is huge for cats. Cats are homebodies that become very attached to their homes and surroundings, and they want everything to be on schedule, on routine, highly predictable. So when we become unpredictable, which could be in the form of squirting them with the squirt bottle or yelling or things like that, they are very confused and very upset because now the routine has changed, and that predictable person is now unpredictable. Hide treats for them to hunt, like we said, and the food puzzle's a great way, but you can also hide them around the house. Forts, tunnels, cardboard boxes, bags. Cat TV is great. We finally got a TV in the Dallas cat room. I don't know if you've been in there to see it. We used to have CDs that we played, but we now can pull up cat TV on YouTube, and we show fish and birds and squirrels and things like that. Catify your foster space, because when we don't provide the appropriate space, kittens are gonna use what's around. So if you don't have a scratching post, they're gonna use the back of the sofa. And once they get used to using your sofa and they think that's a scratching post, they go off to their home and they go, well, I use the sofa over there. Isn't that what it's for? So make sure that we're providing appropriate things. Recognize that they need to climb and access high spaces. It's very normal for a cat to go vertical. So create lots of vertical space. And instead of the kitten's only hiding place being under the couch or bed, make sure it's got a den or a little cat bed or a little hole in a carrier like I'm showing over here. Always focus on positive rather than negative. It's much better to give than it is to take away. So hammocks, lounges, window perches, vertical and horizontal scratching posts. Cats sometimes prefer one over the other, but they really need both. Of course, tunnels and tubes. Here's some tips and tricks that just didn't have any particular spot in this presentation. Zilkene is an over-the-counter medication. If you need a link to it, email me. I'm happy to give it to you. It comes in a little capsule form. And after the kitten is about 8 weeks or older, you can begin to sprinkle it on their food, and it helps increase confidence, reduces fear. We use it a lot in cats that are having confidence issues. Remember to always, it's really just good to say, I'm going to ignore unwanted behavior, especially if it's a kitten. If it's doing something bad, I'm just going to ignore it. And I'm only going to focus on the really great things it does. Scratching posts, the ones that have the toy at the top in particular, if you're not going to wand play over to it, help to teach the kitten to use that versus the furniture. Put scratching posts outside your foster rooms and inside your foster rooms, right inside the door on both sides. And the reason for that is cats scratch as a territory gesture. They have scent glands between their toes. So when they are scratching, they are leaving their personal scent saying, this is my area. And they are also leaving visual markers. And that's what they do in the wild to mark their territory. Anytime we bring fosters into the house, our own cats become a little insecure that their territory is being invaded. So if you put a scratching post right outside the foster room, that gives your own cat a place to diffuse some of those fears and feelings it's having. And it's same thing with the scratching post on the inside of the foster room. Your fosters can smell cats outside, and so that gives them a really good place to scratch. To teach the kitten to get it used to handling, a really good way to do that while you're doing the feeding is put 2 bowls of food. So when the kitten is eating out of one bowl of food, pick up the kitten and place it at the second bowl of food. Let it eat for another 30 seconds, minute, pick it up and put it back at the first bowl of food. So split your meal into 2 bowls. That gives you lots of really great opportunity to handle that kitten in between feedings. And again, that's reinforcing that counter conditioning. Leave a little bit of waste in the litter box, because yes, we want to be super fastidious about litter. Cats do not like to step on soiled litter. So you want to make sure you're scooping 1 to 2 times a day minimum. I scoop probably 3 times a day on my guy. But when we're talking about little kittens, sometimes they get confused about where they're supposed to go. And so leave just a little bit of waste, not a lot. Don't get carried away and say, well, I'm not going to scoop for 3 days because I want to make sure they can find it. Just a little bit, maybe 1 poop and 1 pee in the box. Make sure it's got low sides. I like to use the puppy piddle pans. And again, if you want an example of what that looks like, just email me. I'll send you a link to it. They're available on Amazon. They have nice low sides with a little low dip in the front, and they're good and big. And it's great for a litter of kittens. So, adopter expectations. You've done this fabulous job exposing this cat to all these things, this kitten, and it's now ready to go to its home. How do we now pave that, bridge that between your home and the adopter's home? So here's some things. You'll want to tell the adopter, get their expectations set up, that this kitten's not going to come into their home and immediately be a great kitten, because it is a homebody that's very much attached to its foster home. So I've made these what I call 3-3-3 sheets, and this shows the expectations of a cat settling into a home, cat or kitten. And again, you can email me. I've got them set 2 up. You can print them, give them to adopters. And basically it says it takes them 3 days to decompress, 3 days to learn your routine, and 3 months to really feel at home in your home. So make sure that adopter realizes that there's going to be a transition period. Share your kitten's routine with them so that they can keep it up as best as possible. And at the very least, they understand that routine is important for cats. Educate them on the 10 essential needs of cats. And again, I have created another sheet that has the 10 essential needs of cats broken out into care for cats, and lists out what all those are. Real basic, but not everybody knows them. And then provide cat introduction guidelines. So on the other side of this sheet is how to introduce cats. Again, if you want this in a PDF form, email me. I'm happy to send it to you, because a lot of people are adopting these kittens from us as a buddy for their cat, expecting their cat to react like a dog and go, oh, look, another dog, what fun. And we all know that's not what's going to happen. And so we want to make sure that that introduction goes smoothly for both our kitten and the cat that they're going into. Of course, send along towels and bedding and toys, and as much as you can afford to send along that smells like that kitten, so that when he gets there, that he has the things that feel like home to him. And share our resources with your adopters, because there are a lot of things they probably don't know that their cat needs and that this kitten needs. So share Cat Talk Radio and share our blog and all of that. It's free resources to them. So make sure that they know them. Another tip that I had for you that I forgot to put on the tip page is that the iCalm cat, there is a device called iCalm, and it's just the letter iCalm, and it's iCalm Pets. They make this for dogs and cats. So they have calming cat music, and it's on a little card. I think the player runs about $90 now, and it's a great speaker, and there's a little card, and that music has been scientifically modulated to have low stress frequencies for cats. So it sounds like kind of normal, relaxing music for us, and it's very good to leave on for kittens. But iCalm also has what they call a desensitization track. And that track has babies crying quietly in the background, like trucks going by, dogs barking. It has sounds that, you know, we want to desensitize animals to, kind of normal sounds. I would highly suggest you get that for your foster homes that aren't maybe as active and robust. And like, I don't have a dog. How am I going to expose my cat to a dog? My kitten, thankfully, was fostered by a wonderful gal that lives out in the country and has horses and dogs and a bunch of other cats. And so he loves dogs, and that was no fault of mine. He came that way. So, so that desensitization track on ICOM is very good. Okay, there's my email, molly@catbehaviorsolutions.org. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and we will take any questions that you have. Be sure to unmute yourself and ask away if you have questions about any of this or anything else. I'll do my best to answer. Nothing? No questions?
Could I ask a question?
Please.
It's almost 11 here and my kitten is telling me to come to bed. He's been meowing at me from the bed for about 20 minutes. I was fascinated when you said that during the socialization period, kittens who are exposed to different stimuli, even as adults, maybe months or years later, they might have more susceptibility to accept those stimuli later. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that. For example, if we socialize a kitten to grow up with puppies and dogs, when they're 2 or 3 years old, would they be more predisposed to accept a doggy companion?
Exactly what that means.
Wow.
Is that
I had no idea. That's really exciting.
yeah, and that's the good news. The bad news is that window is so tiny that, you know, as an adopter, right, we can't get kittens until they're 8 weeks old unless we're fostering them or older. And so that foundation has already been laid, and we don't have any control over that as an adopter. So as fosters, that's why it's our responsibility to make sure that that kitten gets that solid foundation and is going to have that exposure to as many different things as possible, because we don't want them to be traumatized later in life, you know, to those things that would be normal in someone else's home. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I have a question in the chat.
Molly,
Yeah, go ahead. Liz,
when you're working with a large litter of kittens, do you find it better to break them up into twos or threes to do some of this more intensive hands-on?
definitely you want to make sure each kitten is handled individually, both with the socialization handling as well as the medical handling. But, and I should say, when you prey play, kittens are more accepting of prey playing together, because naturally that's how their mother would teach them. Cats, not so much. But you'll notice if you have a litter of kittens and you're prey playing with them all, you're going to have some that are more confident and get out there, and you'll have a couple that lag back and never get any prey play in. So I always say it's best to just be real observant of that and probably break them into ones or twos when you're prey playing with them, because each one of them individually needs that. As adults in the wild, they'll spend 6 hours a day hunting. So when we confine them to a home and remove that natural thing that they do, and again, remember, they still have a 96% DNA link to their ancestors, so they still need that, but we don't give it to them because they're indoors. And I'm not saying that letting your cat outdoors to hunt is the right thing to do, because it's not always the right thing to do, but we've got to provide that. We've got to really help them, because they get that pent up stress and energy, you know, it's just like, and it builds and it builds, and cats are so good at hiding it. And then it'll either expose itself as a behavior issue or a health issue. A lot of times it'll it'll come out as a health issue. So that prey play is very important, and it is important that get done on an individual basis. And I think that's probably also why you are seeing DAS break up litters more these days. You know, if we have a litter of 5 or 6 kittens, they'll foster them out in 2s or 3s, because it is easier to get socialization with only 2 or 3, because it's time consuming. The more you have, the more time it takes.
Exactly. That's why I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah. Same with adult cats. I tell people you need to prey play with each of your cats 10 minutes a day, 2 times a day. And you got to scoop all your litter boxes at least twice a day. And oh no, by the way, you need to have 1 more litter box than numbers of cats. And you can see they're adding this up going, but I got to work, right? And I always think, yeah, you need to think about all that before you adopt another cat. Caitlin, did you have?
Yeah, Molly, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I'm over here scribbling notes even about all kinds of things. So this has been really, really cool. I was wondering if you have any tips on redirecting excessive meowing. That can be a tough one, and it's kind of lends itself more to sort of that positive punishment, which you said does not work. So curious if there's any tips on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, because cats don't really have language prior to their living with people. So they are solitary creatures. In the wild, they'll be, unless you have a colony, that's of course supported, but there'll be 1 cat to a 6 city block area. They mark that territory. They don't want any other cat coming in unless it's to mate. And then when the kittens get about 5 months old, they kick them out and make them go get their territory. So they don't really talk to one another. Mom cats will talk to kittens. They'll chirp, they'll purr. That's normal. But as adult cats, they don't really have language. They developed language to talk to us. So if a kitten or cat is excessively vocal, the first thing you want to do is rule out any medical issues. Make sure that they're not vocalizing because they're in discomfort or pain or something is going on. And then if you pay attention to it, because I get this a lot from a behavior standpoint, and I always ask, well, what happens when your cat meows at you a lot? And they tell me, I meow back and I talk to them and I go, well, what's going on? And they encourage it. And I'm like, yeah, well, there you go. It's, you know, if you don't want it, ignore it and don't respond to it. But first make sure that there's nothing going on, because kittens that meow a lot, I tend to worry, is their stomach upset? Are they, you know, are they in pain in some way or shape or form?
That's very helpful. Yeah, I think in my case, I think he just wants attention at the wrong hours of the night. So
yeah,
better.
Now feeding schedule will fix that. If you've got a cat that is meowing in the middle of the night, and that's part of the reason that I actually feed my cat 5 times a day. I said I fed him 4. I feed him in person, me put the bowl down 4 times a day. I feed him 20 minutes after I get up, which is usually about 7:30. I feed him again at 12:30, so he gets lunch. I feed him again at 5:30. I call it his happy hour hors d'oeuvres. And then I feed him dinner right before I go to bed at like 10:30 or 11. And then at that same feeding, I set a food timer to go off at 3 a.m. so that he has a middle of the night. Never, ever, ever do I get woken up earlier than I want to be woken up. Never, ever do I get middle of the night, you know, raiding the pantries and things like that. And that feeding schedule will totally fix that usually.
Great, thank you.
Sure. We've got some chat over here. Sharon asks, will introducing sounds, trucks, etc., work as introduced through a TV screen? Probably, yeah. I would assume it would have to, because the ICOM people have made that desensitization track that it still has music, but it has those noises like in the background, so they're not quite as harsh as you might be getting in a TV. But yes, that definitely would help. And my necklace is awesome. Thank you. Yes, I love my necklace. How do I put my 14-week kitten on raw food diet from kibble? Good question. I feed the kittens raw food that I foster. Now I understand not everybody can afford to feed raw food, especially fosters. But if you notice, most commercial cat foods come in a kitten formula and an adult formula. The big difference there is that the kitten formula has more protein, because kittens need more protein as they're developing their bones and muscles than cats do once they stop growing. Well, raw food, you can't really get much more protein than feeding them a good quality raw diet. So raw food doesn't come in a kitten formula or a cat formula. It's just feline or canine. So I tend to feed raw food right, cradle to grave. But to change it depends on what you're already feeding it. If you're already feeding a kibble diet and or a cat that just has said, I don't want to have anything to do with wet food, start by, there is a transition, a slow transition from one food to another always, because cats hate change. They like routine. So anytime you change something, they're going to go, oh God, no, I don't want it. So do it really, really tiny. And so if you're going from kibble, get the freeze-dried raw. I like Vital Essentials just because it has less ingredients than some of the others. And I'm kind of a limited ingredient liker for freeze-dried patties. And it comes in patties, not the dry kibble, but actually the freeze-dried raw patty. Sprinkle a little bit of that on the kibble, a little bit more the next day, a little bit more the next day, a little bit, and then pull kibble back. And then begin to moisten it. Don't moisten the kibble, because that starts growing bacteria right away as soon as you moisten kibble. So then like a dropper of maybe warmed bone broth, low sodium bone broth on the freeze-dried raw, and then increase that hydration little bit by little bit by little bit, day in, day out. So your transition might take you, 2 weeks, week to 2 weeks. So just go really, really, really slow as you transition. If the cat's already used to eating a canned food, then I like to do, I feed Primal's frozen nuggets, because they come in those bricks that are about that big by about yay wide, and it's fresh frozen raw food. And I can easily I feed him 1.5 bricks 4 times a day. And then at night, he gets dry, freeze-dried raw food in his timer. I don't try to do the wet in the timer, even though the timers I like have packs. And I have this really great timer that is very inexpensive, and it comes with a cold pack. So if you want the link to that, just email me and I'll be happy to send it to you. Let's see, is there a substitute for dog desensitization if you don't have a dog at home? Oh, or is that a kitten just going to end up being a cat that doesn't do well with dogs? Again, you can desensitize a cat to anything as long as you do it gradually and you're not flooding it. So just like we do the cat-to-cat introductions where, the cat's in a sequestered room, and then we slowly get them used to the smell of one another, and then the sight of the other one, and then eventually they touch noses, and then eventually they interact. You would do that similarly if you didn't have a dog at hand. But if you can borrow a dog, especially a well-behaved dog, I would absolutely do that. I love it when, people have dogs that come over to visit. Like I said, Pico, thankfully, was with a foster that had dogs. And so out here, people walk with their dogs off leash a lot, and there's no fences. And so occasionally we'll get these just random dog run up to the back door, and the doors will be open and the screen will be shut, and there's Pico nose to nose with a dog. And he's perfectly fine with it. He's cautious at first, but then he's kind of like, oh boy, can he come in and play, Mom? And seems to be pretty, and again, that's because he was, during that critical socialization time, he was around dogs. So best thing, rent a dog. And there's a new business for somebody, rent their dog out for kitten socialization. And I would imagine, you guys have a big foster network at DPA. So you've probably got other people that are fostering puppies and dogs, and make a play date where you get together. It's easier if the puppies come to the kitten's home than it is to take the kitten to the dog home, but either way works. Cats got to get used to riding in the car anyway. So that would work. Yeah, exactly. Dog fosters would love to help. Yeah. And the same thing goes with dogs. You know, they too have a socialization period where all of this means the same thing for them. So for them to get exposed to a kitten and learn to appropriately play with the kitten and not to be afraid and not to eat it and that kind of thing, that's helping the puppy as well. Great. Okay. Fosters, please take a moment to complete the post-session survey. And how did they do that? And also it looks like, is that Janae says you would donate, you would volunteer your dog to socialize with kittens?
Yes, one of my dogs previously lived with a cat, so he
Oh.
loves them.
Perfect. There you go.
And sorry, I'm putting the link right now for everyone.
Okay, great. Everybody be sure to get that link, copy that link out of the chat bar. It'll go away as soon as we end the meeting. So copy that link and then be sure to take that survey. Any other questions? I think I got to them all, didn't I? 081 new one. Can you send out the link via email? You have everybody's email that's on here? I can help with Ania, who had left early. I think I have her email. I can send that to you. So, great. Any other questions? Good. I'm glad you guys are finding this informative. That's great. Be thinking about what you might want me to talk about next time, because we talked about doing this, you know, once a quarter or so. So, as you have thoughts or suggestions, either send them to Danica or me. Okay, currently I have 2 under-socialized 11-week-old kittens. They're allowing gentle pats while feeding. How soon should I attempt to pick them up? I stopped forcing burrito wrapping some time ago. Yeah, that kind of depends on the cat. Each one is different. I like to make sure that they're comfortable with proximity first and considerate approach. So, you know, you're right. You don't want to flood them, you know, with I'm going to grab you and burrito wrap you. That's habituation, which works. I mean, again, you're probably teaching them that they can tolerate pets, but is it really socializing at this point? It's not really. So what we want to do is think in terms of gradual desensitization. So I'm going to get within 2 feet of you, and then 1 feet of you, and then 6 inches. And I'm gonna lure you, again, another great reason not to free feed. Use that feeding time for socialization, works really well with kittens this age. So before you put the food down, take the lick and lap, put it on a spoon or something, because again, that's your hand is a distance away, and lure them towards you and lure them up in your lap. And then as they're eating the lick and lap, begin to pet and touch, wrap the arm around them so that they get used to feeling your arms and hands around their body. And then, you know, and 2 hands, always pet with 2 hands down the side. That way they're getting used to you picking up, and then slowly let that go under the belly and lift a little bit. And then, you know, just a little tiny, tiny steps at a time. We have a cat we're working with at the Grand Junction Humane Society through the Jackson Galaxy program right now, that I took in a cat that's at a year old, absolutely would not let anybody near it. You get within about a 3-foot distance and the cat would take off and run and hide. And we had the challenge of, how do you clicker train this cat? How do you get close enough to this cat to deliver the reinforcer? Even because it takes off running. Well, we have gotten this cat, so we trained it now to climb up on their lap on cue. So all they have to do is sit down on the floor, pat their lap and go lap, and he climbs up on their lap. And we did that all with luring. right? And they had to stop free feeding. Difficult in a shelter setting because that's what we do, but they were committed to helping these cats. So they stopped free feeding and they started feeding meals, and we worked our training sessions in before meals. And so the cat's good and hungry, and you lure him closer and closer and click and reward. And then as soon as he touches the lap, click and reward, and he now will climb right up onto people's laps. And now we're working with the desensitization of, okay, now that you're in my lap, can I pet you while you're in my lap eating that lick and lap off the spoon? Now, can I put my arm around you? Are you comfortable with that? So little baby steps at a time. Technically, that's called shaping in an operant conditioning technique, where you're rewarding for little successive approximations to that final behavior, which is picking up. Did that help? Did that answer you? Okay, good. All right. Any other questions? Are we good? Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. Danica, did you want to say anything in closing?
Thank you so much for all of your insight and for hosting this for us. It's been super beneficial, and I'm excited to go tackle kitten season now with our fosters and
Yay.
Be armed with info.
Yay, that's great.
You.
Well, if anybody has anything, that you think of post meeting, don't hesitate to email. I'm happy to answer them for you.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Molly.
All right. Thank you guys for coming. Until next time, keep calm and purr on.
Bye.
Bye-bye.